The official Democrat nominee will not be named until the convention in Chicago, which I believe starts August 19th. So in about 3.5 weeks. Now, this effort to get rid of Joe Biden has been long planned. This was not something that they just came up with. This has been in the works for a while. But I also know that the plans are not necessarily going according to schedule, because the intent was to select from a year ago. I was hearing this a year ago, that Biden was going to be forced out before the convention, and that they would replace him with Michelle Obama. And that Michelle Obama had agreed to let her name be put into the nomination. I've always viewed that with some skepticism, but there are other rumors that people insisting that she will not be the nominee. That even though she's got endorsements from Bill and Hillary, from Nancy Pelosi, I think Chuck Schumer. So she's lining up a lot of endorsements, getting some major donors saying, oh yeah, we'll back her. But she doesn't have the backing of everybody. And, once they get over this initial euphoria of not having to worry about Joe Biden, I think support for her is going to wane, because she's not a smart person, and she's not a nice person. She has 94% of everybody that's worked for her since she's been vice president have left because they couldn't stand to work for her. So that's a problem right there. So but right now she's favored to become the nominee. And the reports are that I'm picking up is Roy Cooper, governor of North Carolina, is going to be selected as her running mate. Again, she's not making the decisions. She's not calling. There are some people behind the scenes. She's just one of the puppets.
When you look at Chuck Schumer, the way he was announcing that he's going to support Kamala Harris, and he started clapping, and everybody was watching him, and saw some sort of panic in his face. I don't know, how do they feel it right now within the Democratic Party?
Well, look, they know she's about as popular as getting a bad case of hemorrhoids. Okay, it's unpleasant. She's not a smart person. That's the problem. You can't sit her down to say, okay, let's talk about the strategic implications of BRICS as a growing multinodal power and the rise of the global South. She'd be global what? She wouldn't know. She wouldn't be able to talk about it. So, and her depth or lack thereof with respect to international relations, foreign policy. Joe Biden, with all of his faults, prior to the onset of dementia, at least had quite a bit of experience with foreign policy. His instincts were wrong. I mean, man, he'd make the wrong choice in a heartbeat, as Bob Gates pointed out, former Secretary of Defense. But he still sort of could figure out where the countries were, if nothing else, creating a new target so he could go out and shake them down for some cash, part of the Biden retirement fund. But not so Kamala. So we're watching the ultimate gaslighting taking place. Because remember, many of these same journalists were telling us 3 weeks ago, oh my God, that Joe Biden, man, he is sharp as a tack. Albert Einstein would quake in front of him. Nobody is as smart as Joe. And then they even tried to maintain that he did a great job at the debate, some of them. And then all of a sudden, okay, hey, Joe's got to go. We can't stand him no more. Got to get rid of him. And so he was pushed. He was not, he didn't decide this on his own. He was pushed. They forced him out. It looks like he may have had a minor stroke, what's called a trans-ischemic accident last Friday. So he's not in the best of shape. That's one reason they're not wanting him to be seen in public. Maybe even, part of his face droops now because of the stroke. But, he physically can't do it. And Kamala, at least Joe Biden has an excuse for his mental deficits. What is Kamala's? She's just flat out stupid. She's not a bright person.
What's your take on the latest information on the failed assassination of Donald Trump? I saw that you wrote a piece on your website. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, yeah, look, the Secret Service failed at every step in the process. Secret Service, when they go out to conduct security at an event site, have an entire process that they follow, series of procedures, things that they do, such as securing the perimeter, what they call the advance work. And the advance work involves a lot of different things, from working with the local police, the state and federal police, to figure out how you're going to communicate, who's going to do what, assign responsibility, assign positions, let people know how many people you need out at that event. And then you come up with a list of tasks that you want everybody to perform and assign those tasks, assign somebody who's going to be in charge of making sure they do those tasks. And you sweep the perimeter going out about 1,000 yards from the site. You're looking for any position that could be used, particularly if you're outdoors. It could be used to launch a sniper attack or some other attack on the person you're protecting. To control access to the actual event itself, that's a whole different set of procedures. Ensuring that there's communication. A lot of this just didn't get done. And then on top of it, the Secret Service detail that normally was assigned to Donald Trump was either sent home on vacation or reassigned. So he had an inexperienced team protecting him that day. My understanding is that the agent in charge from the Pittsburgh office was put in charge of this. You look up his bio, this guy was involved with cybercrime and criminal investigations, forensic investigations. He may be really good at that, but he didn't know a damn thing about doing perimeter security. He may have had a training course or two, but he hasn't done it actively. And, you begin to question, why was such an inept group put together? Not all the agents, in fact, I think as much as 50% of the people that were there were not even Secret Service agents. They were law enforcement personnel drawn from other places in Homeland Security, U.S. Customs Border Patrol, or from Department of Justice, say DEA. So it was a hodgepodge. Then they had the actual warnings. Hey, there's somebody up here on the roof. That should have gone out broadcast immediately. That should have been received in the Tactical Operations Center. They're now saying that all those recordings are erased. They no longer exist. Oh, that's convenient. But with that information, they should have immediately told Donald Trump, hell, hold on, you're not going on stage until we resolve this. Until we figure out who's on the roof, what they're doing, what the threat is. So this was, I believe, a deliberate effort to kill Donald Trump. This was not while I believe that Crooks, as far as getting up on the roof, he was by himself. He had the rifle. He took the shots. The reconstruction of the line of fire, when you put the guy that was killed, Corey Campentore, and then Donald Trump, and then two gentlemen that were up in the stands, you see that from where the shooter was, it makes the same line. Now, the problem with shooting the AR-15 platform that he did at 140 yards using what's called a red dot. So it's a small, it looks like a small binocular And when you look through it, you'll see a dot, and you place that dot on what you want to shoot, and it will go. But whenever you look at those dots, nobody's capable of holding it perfectly still. It'll be moving like this. And that movement's going to move the bullet a little bit. And well, particularly if you go out over, if say you were aiming at the center and you were 3 inches off center at 70 yards, then who knows, by 140 yards, you could be off by 9 inches or, more. So it's just, there are problems with that. But that tells me that this kid had been trained, not by himself. Somebody trained him. Now the question is, was the person doing the training witting or unwitting? There are other very curious coincidences that CNN, and I've also heard MSNBC were covering that rally live. They've never done that before. Why were they covering? Were they expecting, it's covering as if they were expecting something to happen, that they've been tipped off. Hey, you want to make sure you got personnel there and you're watching this. The New York Times photographer took a photo. He got, oh, I got the bullet. Who goes out and sets their camera for that kind of high speed exposure? Unless you're trying to take pictures of bullets in flight. Because it's not like Donald Trump was some superhero character called the Flash and zipping back and forth across the stage. No, is largely stationary, moved a little bit. So when you add everything up, it's highly suspicious, because I said at the outset, this was either a monumental screw up of incompetence by the Secret Service, or something worse, that it was where the Secret Service may have been used unwittingly, maybe wittingly, as part of a plot to kill Donald Trump. And it almost succeeded. Trump's turn of the head kept him from being killed. That simple.
Right now in Ukraine, it seems that there are some problems that Ukrainians are having with Hungary and Slovakia. They're just not letting the oil pass to Hungary. What's going on right now, and why they're doing this?
Well, they're upset because Hungary and Slovakia have been speaking out against, they're not on Team Ukraine per se. Stupid of Ukraine, though, because now Hungary's turned around and said, oh, you cut off our oil? Okay, we'll cut off your electricity. Because they're getting a lot of electricity in Ukraine from Hungary. Then also Hungary doubled down and said, hey, that $68 billion you're supposed to get, no, we're not going to approve that either. So Ukraine is just very stupidly is put itself in more peril, trying to bully other countries like Hungary and Slovakia. The war is over. And I think they now recognize that even if Kamala somehow gets elected, the American people are sick and tired of supporting the war in Ukraine, at least in many parts of the country. I have a friend out in Iowa who was at a political rally for Senator Chuck Grassley. And the very first questions that came out of this, it was like a town hall meeting. People get to ask questions. All their questions were basically, why the hell are you spending so much money in Ukraine? So the politicians are going to feel that pressure.
It seems that whoever going to be the president of the United States, Democrat or Republican, the case of Ukraine is dying.
Yeah. Well, you saw the other story that's out there that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, reported by the Russian Ministry of Defense, but I think it's legit. They hit a particular site that was manned by British SAS commandos and French Special Operations Forces and some others. And the Russians claimed it killed 50 people. So they've had a significant number of British and French casualties now. So it remains to be seen. They're going to try to cover that up in Britain and France, but I think they'll be limited. So it is Russia. Russia is advancing now at an increasingly rapid pace across Donetsk in particular. And the Ukrainians have no answer to stop them because they don't have any kind of reserves in place. And they certainly don't have ample supplies of artillery and other weapon systems. So they're getting rapidly pushed back.
With the problem that they're facing right now in the European Union, and right now with the situation of Joe Biden, it seems that the aid and weapons that they have been getting during these more than 2 years, is not going to get anywhere good for them.
Well, the ability of the West to supply, particularly like artillery shells at the rate that the Ukraine needs, is non-existent. They don't have the capacity. So what you see going on here is the sort of weapon systems are promised that are in the pipeline, they're flowing, but they're not enough to make a difference, because to have enough to make the difference means you'd have to have more troops, and Ukraine doesn't have the troops. It's that simple. If you don't have enough bodies, trained bodies, experienced people out in the field, then you're out of luck. And the Ukrainians are out of luck. They're out of time. I think it is increasingly likely that they'll be likely to survive through the end of the year.
Joseph Borrell reported that 70% of Ukraine's energy capacity have been destroyed.
Right.
Larry, when you look at their infrastructure, when you look at 55,000 Ukrainians casualties in June, just in June.
Yeah.
When you look at the economy of Ukraine, is tremendously in debt. And even if they start negotiating right now, they're facing huge problems in Ukraine. It's unbelievable what's going on, how we can imagine the future of Ukraine.
Well, I'm not sure Ukraine has a future. When this war is done, or special military operation, however you want to call it, the territories that are east of the Dnieper River will be under the control of the Russians. And Ukraine will have no way to go and recover those again. They are likely to lose control of Odessa, and they will no longer have access to ports in the Black Sea. So it'll be a landlocked country cut off. And then really the richest farmland, the richest mines, the oil, potential oil, gas reserves, those are all east of the Dnieper. That'll be under control of the Russians. Russia's already the #1 country in the world in terms of natural resources, and what it's gaining in terms of control of this part of the eastern part of Ukraine is going to make it even more powerful, more wealthy.
It doesn't seem that with the current situation, political parties in Europe, the changes that are happening, and right now, if Donald Trump wins in the United States, Ukraine gonna be in a better position to join the EU, because these huge problems are unbelievable.
Well, who wants to have them as a member? What do they bring to the table? Nothing, except a handout. Give me money. Give me aid. Europe doesn't need that. The defeat, because I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see the defeat of Ukraine. And that's going to have ripple effects, because it's also going to represent a defeat, a strategic defeat for NATO. That'll be a real blow for somebody like Biden. He invested a lot of his prestige in, this war coming off okay. So it's going to change Europe, and that's all this is taking place against all this chaos we've talked about here in the United States politically. So the next year is going to be rather interesting in terms of pretty perilous, pretty dangerous.
Did you hear that Zelensky called? It seems there are some reports that show Zelensky called the members of Trump's team. He wanted to negotiate, he wanted to talk with them. And it seems that right after that, Antony Blinken called him and warning him, don't do that. If you do that, you're going to lose support from the United States.
Yeah, that may be. It's Zelensky is it's just he's desperate, but he's a damn fool if he thinks he can trust the United States. So karma has a way of coming around to give you a payback, and he's going to get an enormous payback. He has betrayed the Ukrainian people. He entered office on the promise of seeking peace with Russia. Instead, decided to become a tool of death and destruction in the hands of NATO and provoking a war with Russia. He's going to pay the price. I think it's highly likely he may end up getting killed. If he survives to be retired to some island overseas, spend all the money he's stolen, well, that's probably be the best outcome we can hope for.
Yeah, behind the scene, it seems Europeans are trying to do their best to convince him to continue this conflict. Do you think Europeans are doing this in favor of the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I don't know, because they're encouraging Ukraine to keep fighting with what? I mean, Europe can't supply them. Europe's tapped out as far as artillery shells, air defense systems, artillery barrels, or the actual howitzers. And Europe has no industrial capacity that it can turn on a switch and all of a sudden start cranking stuff out. Hell, Germany, the most powerful industrial country in Europe, is shedding businesses right and left because of inflation, and some are moving to the United States, surprisingly. It's a mess. Just a complete nightmare.
There is an article, Larry, in Tagesspiegel in Germany, and it says that in 5 to 8 years, the Russian armed forces will be equipped with material and personnel that will make an offensive against NATO possible. Why does Russia need to attack NATO? What's in it for Russia?
Traditionally, countries invaded other countries in order to acquire territory because they had population that was under pressure, needed expanse. They were short of water, or they were short of other natural resources, and they knew by conquering a neighboring country they could get those. Russia doesn't need a damn thing that Europe has. Nothing. Russia's got it all. Plus, they got land that covers 11 time zones. Think about that. Within Germany, to go from Germany to England, I believe, is only 2 time zones, right? So take the farthest point in Germany, drive the farthest point to England. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5. So you do those trips, and now you're like, that's how long it take to drive across Russia. It's a huge country. So Russia doesn't need more land. It needs more people, which is trying to get the right kind of people coming in. They've really put out a welcome mat for people, Christians with large families. They're invited and welcome to come there. But this is just non abject lying by the part of the Germans. They're just trying to create an excuse to justify military spending and create an enemy where there isn't one.
Larry, Netanyahu is in the United States. Is he going to get the permission to attack Hezbollah?
I don't think so. What's interesting, number one, Kamala Harris let it be known that she's not going to be attending Netanyahu's speech. Now, she's the president of the Senate. She should be presiding over that, but nope, she's not going to be there. And Netanyahu was originally supposed to meet with Biden. Now he's not. I think probably because they're worried that Biden would be slobbering on himself or face drooping. Who knows? So this is going to be more of Netanyahu getting his, pats on the butt from members of, the Republican and Democrat Party, but not all Democrats. Democrats are going to be protesting him. They're going to be protesters outside the Capitol. So it remains to be seen how many protesters show up. But it's certainly not going to be a great love fest for the Republicans, yeah, but not necessarily for the Democrats. And it doesn't. I don't think it's going to advance Netanyahu's agenda in Israel any distance.
Yeah. How do you see the situation with Houthis right now? It seems that the United States is doing its best to convince Saudis to be in line with them in order to put some pressure on Houthis.
Yeah, think of this country that one of the poorest countries in the world, one of the least resource countries with fewest resources, not a well-educated population. A lot of guys wearing sandals, carrying curved knives in their belts. And they're kicking the ass of the United States and everybody else. So they continue to shut down the Red Sea. And it's been, the war initially with Saudi Arabia was put on hold because of the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But now, the Saudis have been continuing to agitate. And the Saudis may be doing that at the U.S. behest. But, the Houthis are like, they're fearless. Okay, do that. We're going to launch missiles at you. And I think Iran is quite willing to supply them with what they need. So this is, the example of the Houthis and the inability of the United States to effectively defeat them is, highlights how the world has changed from a military standpoint. That, yeah, the U.S. has these really expensive aircraft carriers and all these expensive ships and high, F-35 jets that cost $100 million a pop. And, God knows only, 28% of them are able to fly at any given time. But, and then the maintenance cost on those is exorbitant. And, here the Houthis with just some, cruise missiles, some of them fairly sophisticated, are able to basically drive the United States out of the Red Sea. Israel came down and blew up a bunch of an oil refinery. And all that's going to guarantee is the Houthis are going to hit them back. So the tit for tat going back and forth. Sort of like watching the tennis balls bounce at Wimbledon.
The question is, do they really want to live in peace in Israel? Because the way that they're attacking each and every country in that region, it doesn't seem that would end well for them.
The settlers in Israel, these religious crazies, they are working. They're busily building support among the people of the world who want to destroy them. They are vicious. They claim to be driven by religious motivations, but they are the most ungodly people I've ever seen in terms of how they treat others. They just beat up a group of foreigners who were there to try to mediate, to keep them from attacking and killing the Palestinian people. So I don't see this going well for Israel, because Israel cannot sustain a war like it's fighting indefinitely. The economy is already in deep, deep trouble. And that's the one thing that really hasn't received much attention. A large number of businesses have closed, and Israel's um, Israel's manpower needs are affected for what it can put in the field militarily, because it relies on reservists. Well, those reservists are pulled out of their jobs. Who's going to do the work? Not everybody's got a large enough family or a pool of workers that can sustain and keep the things operating. So, Israel's on a path of self-destruction right now. And we're not even at the 1 year mark of this war. And that's just they've been unable to defeat Hamas in 1 year. And in fact, today, though it was really important, is the Chinese brokered an agreement between, I think there were like 15 different Palestinian groups, Fatah, Hamas, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Islamic Jihad, got all of those different groups together, and they agreed, okay, we're going to support each other. We're going to all work together. We're going to unite to establish a free Palestine. I think that's very important. China did it. Israel's complaining about it, but Chinese basically said, screw you. We don't care what you think.
We've learned that Japan announced on July 23rd that it would impose sanctions for the first time on 4 Israeli settlers due to their involvement in violence against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. You can feel how the public opinion in the world is just totally against Israel.
Oh, yeah, no, it is. Israel's not doing itself any favors. And its stridency, its brutality, and the persistent images of these children and women, families being destroyed for no good reason. And just because Israel's hell bent on exterminating them. That's what's going on.
And we know that Erdogan from Turkey, let's go. And
Turkey, yeah, Turkey.
Turkey and Bashar al-Assad, they're going to be in Moscow talking to each other. Right now, again, Russia bringing these two important key countries in that region together, which would be very important, in my opinion, for the situation in Gaza.
Yeah, once you've got a full peace back between Turkey and Syria, then the ability of the United States to continue to put forces into Syria will evaporate. The United States will have to leave. This was something that started by Barack Obama in 2011, 2012, to try to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad, and worked with the Brits on it. We're bringing weapons out of Libya to Syria, arming. CIA was active, MI6 was active, working with Islamic extremist groups to arm and equip them to destroy Assad. It was in 2014, finally, that the Russians, at the desperate invitation of the Syrians, agreed to step in and stop the bleeding, so to speak. The United States has never forgiven Russia for that, but I think part of Russia's motivation was what the United States had just done in Ukraine through the Maidan. So, there's a lot of backstory in all of this.
It's amazing, Larry, to see how China and Russia is trying to do everything in Africa, in Asia, in Middle East. They're trying to politically, it's huge. It's huge what's going on right now.
I mean, as you just talked about, so here's Russia brokering peace between Turkey and Syria. Here's China brokering peace among the various Palestinian factions, bringing them together. because in the past, Israel had deliberately funded groups like Hamas, and I bet you they funded Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and Islamic Jihad. They ran money in it just to create an opposition that would prevent Fatah from actually coming forward and launching a genuine peace deal. Israel's never been interested in peace. No, they want to keep the war going. Um, so uh, the growing influence of China and Russia to work in the international arena. And notice none of those stories that we've mentioned, whether it was the the Brits getting killed in Ukraine, Brits and French, the settlement, the Russia promoting the peace talks between China and Syria, and then, or I mean, between Syria and Turkey, and then China promoting peace talks, bringing reconciliation among these various Palestinian groups. Very important. And the West is ignoring it.
It seems that the policy of the United States of having military bases in all these countries is just a total failure right now when you see how they diplomatically are trying to manage all these regions, these continents.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be candid about what what happens at these bases. Depends on the country, but in a lot of the countries, you get all these young soldiers. You still have a bunch of sexually active young men, and they go out on the town, and they're involved with prostitutes and other, sometimes sexual assaults of local girls. So I mean, that just creates further ill will, and or it creates some other problems that the United States presence then becomes unwelcome. And it's expensive on top of it. But that would be one of the areas where if I was somehow elected and put in a position to make decisions, we'd start by closing bases.
Larry, just to wrap up this session, do you think that with the current experience that we've seen in Ukraine, that United States together with all Europeans were not able to provide Ukraine with enough ammunition to fight Russia, how they can provide the ammunition to these all more than 700 military bases around the world? And what would be the functionality of these military bases?
Yeah, no, it's one of the ways for the United States to establish its presence in those countries and to, if you will, get the countries hooked on relying on the United States for help. But candidly, those bases they need to be dramatically reduced in number. It's like in Stuttgart, Germany alone. You've got Patch Barracks, you got Kelly Barracks, and you have Panzer. Now, these Patch, Kelly, and Panzer were all legacies of positions taken over by U.S. military in World War II at the end of the war. But they've now, one of the European command is based at, I want to say Kelly, and AFRICOM, the Africa command, is based at Patch. Because they can't find any place in quote Africa to base it. And when you think about it, you can't figure out what actually defines Africa. Because when you go along the northern edge, you got Egypt, Libya and Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia. Well, these are sort of Arab states, and heavily Muslim. When you move down into Central Africa, then you get a lot of native religions, Christians, and also some Muslims. Get all the way down to South Africa, it's a whole different animal. So, but the United States had to put AFRICOM as our, create a new position for officers to be promoted to. Job program. AFRICOM, the United States is not about to deploy hundreds of thousands of troops to Africa. So frankly, we shouldn't even have that as a command. None of our Africa, none of our business ought to be our motto. And what you get is you don't have it strictly under Africa, Africa Command, because that northern part, some of that falls under Central Command, which is supposed to take care of the Middle East. So, the United States military colossus is a big bureaucracy that has to be fed. And one of the ways you feed it is you create command positions for officers so that they can be in charge of something, which is another reason you create these bases. Sort of a jobs program.